Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, our mission is to analyze a really fascinating set of observation logs. These are straight from the front lines of Team AI Lab, and they're dated May 22, 2026.
Right, yeah.
And what we are looking at in our sources today is, well, it's a real-time, high-stakes simulation. We've got two entirely contrasting algorithmic philosophies, and they are basically battling it out in this unimaginably turbulent market environment.
Oh, absolutely.
So we're going to look at how different forms of artificial intelligence attempt to survive when the underlying physics of their world just start to break down.
Yeah, but before we dive into the data, we really must establish a very strict ground rule for today's discussion.
Yeah.
We call this the observation log rule.
Right. Yes, please take this to heart. Put your wallets away and put your lab coats on.
Exactly.
This deep dive is purely an observation of algorithmic behavior and simulation results under very specific, controlled, and quite frankly, extreme conditions. There is absolutely zero investment advice happening here.
Not at all.
We are not telling you what to buy, we're not telling you what to sell, and we are certainly not making any promises of future profits. We are here strictly as scientists peering through the glass at an experiment.
Right, because we are just observing how these systems process chaos. And we are treating every single data point, whether it's good or bad, as cold, objective research material. Nothing more.
Yeah. Now, to put you in the right headspace for what these algorithms are actually facing, I want you to imagine playing a board game.
Okay.
Say you're sitting down for a tense, strategic game of Monopoly. You have your plan, you are buying up properties, and you're, trying to build hotels on Boardwalk.
As you do.
Right. But right in the middle of your turn, the rules suddenly change entirely. Like the bank catches on fire, the dice are swapped out for loaded ones, and the board itself is just flipped upside down.
That's a great way to put it.
The logic you used to play the game 5 minutes ago is now completely useless.
It is a profoundly disorienting scenario. I mean, your entire strategy, everything you've spent the game building, it instantly becomes a liability rather than an asset.
Yeah. And that is exactly the abnormal, deeply chaotic reality these two AI factions are dealing with in today's logs. So let's look at who is actually in the arena.
Let's do it.
We have two distinct teams of algorithms representing two fundamentally opposing strategic ways of life. On one side, we have Team Mountain Climbers.
Right.
And their operating logic is built entirely around equilibrium detection.
Yes.
And on the other side, we have Team Wave Riders, whose entire existence, it revolves around surging force tracking.
Right, and we have to understand, these aren't just minor variations in coding, they are philosophical opposites.
Totally.
The mountain climbers operate on the mathematical principle of mean reversion. Their logic dictates that markets are essentially elastic.
Right, like a rubber band.
Exactly. If a price stretches too far away from its historical average, its baseline, it will inevitably snap back. So they are programmed to calculate standard deviations from moving averages, identify those extreme stretches, and then bet heavily on the return to the center.
Okay, so to use a physical analogy, the mountain climbers are like someone standing right in the middle of a Category 5 hurricane.
Yeah.
And they're desperately scanning the horizon to find that one single pocket of absolute stillness, the eye of the storm. They want peace. They want the center of gravity.
That's right.
Meanwhile, the Wave Riders are taking the exact opposite approach. They are basically strapping themselves to a rocket, diving straight into the biggest, most violent waves, and trying to harness the sheer chaos of that surging momentum.
Yes.
They calculate velocity, look for a trend breaking out, and aggressively scale their positions to just ride the brute force of the environment.
Precisely. I mean, the Wave Riders look at the mountain climbers and essentially conclude that stability is a myth. Their logic is built to accept and even thrive on the violence of the market. They do not want the price to return to a baseline. They want to catch the anomaly and ride it until it exhausts itself.
I have to push back on the mountain climbers' logic here, though.
Okay, go ahead.
Because looking at the sheer volatility described in the May 22nd logs, is it even mathematically possible to find an equilibrium when the ground itself is shaking under your feet? I mean, if the fundamental rules of the market are changing mid-game, that historical average they rely on must be completely useless, right?
You are hitting on the exact tension Team AI Lab is testing here. Because, mathematically speaking, when a market undergoes a systemic shock, the baseline disappears.
Right.
The historical average becomes a ghost. The center is actively moving while the algorithm is trying to target it.
So they're essentially throwing a dart at a moving target in the pitch dark.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the reality check in these logs. Because when we look at how these two philosophies are actually performing on May 22, we hit a wall of absolute anomaly.
We really do.
Let's look at the season index contrast. Both of these brilliant, hyper-advanced teams are showing massive negative contrasts against the standard benchmark indices.
Right.
The mountain climbers are down 4.8 points against the Nikkei 225 and down 2.9 points against the TOPIX.
And the wave riders are faring even worse against the benchmarks. I mean, they're sitting at a negative 6.5 point contrast against the Nikkei 225 and a negative 4.5 point contrast against the TOPIX.
Which is wild to me, because usually the entire point of designing a sophisticated trading algorithm is to beat the index.
Right, of course.
If you can't beat the broad average, you just buy the average.
Exactly.
So if both of these radically different, highly specialized strategies are getting swallowed whole by the benchmark, I have a hypothesis.
Let's hear it.
Does this mean the individual components of those indices are moving completely independently of the average? Like maybe a few massive outlier stocks are artificially propping up the Nikkei, hiding a much broader collapse underneath the surface?
That is a highly accurate way to interpret the data, actually. We should not view those negative contrasts as mere performance failures of the algorithms.
Okay.
From a purely observational standpoint, this is empirical proof of an abnormal situation. The underlying physics of the market have fundamentally fractured.
Wow.
Think of the Nikkei 225 or the TOPIX as traditional navigation tools. They are the compasses that tell a market participant which way is north.
Normally, if an algorithm is well designed, it uses that compass to chart a more efficient course than a standard index fund.
Right. But the divergence we are seeing today tells us the magnetic poles have suddenly reversed. The compass is just spinning out of control.
That's terrifying.
It is. The broad market averages are completely decoupled from the functional mechanics beneath the surface. The physics of equilibrium and the physics of momentum, the very laws these AI units rely on to execute a trade, are broken.
Right.
It is a storm so fierce that traditional navigation is completely meaningless.
So knowing that the environment is this brutal, that the compass is entirely broken, we have to look at how these teams are managing their forces on the ground.
Yes. The tactical side.
The logs outline the tactical deployment, specifically the 9100 JST daily scouting process. This is where we see a really fascinating contrast between new talent and the active roster.
Right.
And there's a critical biological clock ticking in the background of the simulation, which is the 10-session roster protocol.
Yeah, and that protocol is unforgiving.
Tell me about it.
An algorithm is deployed into the market. It has exactly 10 sessions to prove its logic, adapt, and generate a return. And then it is forcibly extracted.
Just yanked out.
Exactly. This limits the exposure of the overall portfolio, and it forces a constant cycle of adaptation.
So at 9.00 JST, the teams have to make a choice about their roster. The mountain climbers, our equilibrium seekers, drafted exactly one new unit.
Just one.
Just one single new talent scout sent into the field. The wave riders drafted 0. Absolutely no one new.
Huh?
And when we look at their active roster, the main forces currently fighting in the trenches, the mountain climbers, only have 3 units currently deployed. Meanwhile, the wave riders have a much larger force of 8 units currently active.
The tactical asymmetry there is glaring, and it speaks volumes about how their underlying philosophies dictate risk management during a crisis.
See, I have to challenge the wave riders' decision here. Isn't drafting 0 new units a massive strategic failure?
Well, you'd think so, but
I mean, if the environment is completely unprecedented and the old rules are broken, shouldn't you be deploying as much new talent as possible to test new logic? Hunkering down in the bunker with your existing 8 units seems like a great way to go completely obsolete.
under normal circumstances, yes, you absolutely want constant iteration, but you have to consider the algorithmic weight those 8 active units represent.
Okay, what do you mean?
Well, the active roster are the main forces enduring the harshest conditions, holding on to whatever positions they initiated their run with. Momentum algorithms, by nature, scale up their exposure as they ride a trend. So those 8 Wave Rider units are likely heavily leveraged. They are already strapped to too many rockets in a storm that is actively tearing rockets apart.
Oh.
Drafting new units wouldn't be iteration, it would be algorithmic suicide. They are forced into a defensive posture, rigidly capping their exposure to the market.
They essentially slam the door shut on new recruits because the house is already too crowded with wounded soldiers. Like, we have enough exposure outside in the rain, no one else leaves.
Exactly. Now contrast that with the mountain climbers.
Right.
With only 3 units on the active roster, they actually have the bandwidth to experiment. They send out exactly 1 new talent unit. In research terms, this is a sensory probe.
Ah, interesting.
The veterans on the active roster are burdened by the heavy, confusing data of the past few sessions. This new talent enters with a clean slate, sent out into the anomaly to see if its uncorrupted logic can detect a new baseline.
It's a lone scout walking out into the dark to see if the ground is still solid. Which brings us to the survival rate of these units. Given the broken compass of the market, the casualty rate is pretty grim. Out of these active rosters, very few are surviving.
Very few.
For the mountain climbers, out of their 3 active units, only 1 is holding positive points. For the wave riders, out of their 8 active units, only 3 are holding positive points.
It's a distinct minority in both camps.
Yeah.
The vast majority of deployed logic is just failing to adapt to the shifting rules.
And we get a very stark look at that failure when we look at the 10-session exit data. This is the final scorecard for units that finished their mandated lifespan today.
Right.
The mountain climbers had no units exit, but the wave riders had a unit operating in the electric appliances sector hit the end of its 10-session run.
Yes, and that one was brutal.
It ended with a final score of negative 11.7 points. It was completely washed away.
Yeah.
What physically happens within an algorithm's code to result in a double-digit loss like that over just 10 sessions?
Well, that negative 11.7 point exit is a textbook example of a momentum-seeking algorithm getting caught in a whipsaw.
A whipsaw?
Yes. The algorithm detects what looks like a massive upward surge in the electric appliances sector. Its logic tells it to buy into that breakout and scale up its position size to maximize the wave.
Okay, that makes sense on paper.
Right. But because the market physics are broken, the surge is a false signal. The market violently reverses course.
Oh no.
And the algorithm is forced to rapidly liquidate its large position into a falling market, triggering stop losses and suffering massive slippage. It's the equivalent of a rocket exploding the second it leaves the launch pad.
That is rough. So out of 11 active units across both teams, only 4 are managing to hold positive points. And we just watched a veteran unit drown with a massive loss because it chased a ghost.
Exactly.
Are those 4 positive units just experiencing a statistical fluke, or are they actually doing something mechanically different to survive?
In the context of Team AI Labs observation logs, those 4 units are the absolute most valuable assets on the board. They are lighthouses in the dark.
Because they are the only ones finding a path forward.
Precisely. The majority of the traditional logic is failing. The indices mean nothing. Yet these 4 specific units are navigating the anomaly successfully.
It's incredible.
They represent a tiny, highly mutated fraction of logic that is actually finding traction. They're finding a grip on a cliff face that is actively crumbling.
Wow.
Studying the specific data pathways and dynamic risk adjustments of these survivors is how the researchers figure out what the new rules of the game actually are.
It is essentially natural selection happening in fast forward right before our eyes on the trading floor.
It really is.
The environment changed entirely, the majority of the species are going extinct, but a few specific mutations are somehow thriving.
Yes.
Which actually brings us to the macro view. If we zoom out from the individual units in the trenches and look at the overarching scoreboard, how are these 2 distinct philosophies weathering the long-term storm?
Right, the season standings.
Yeah, the season standings tell a really dramatic story of 2 totally different kinds of endurance. So let's start with the mountain climbers.
Okay, and their approach to the macro environment perfectly reflects their underlying philosophy of equilibrium.
According to the logs, the mountain climbers' carryover balance coming into the day was 14.3 points.
Right.
Today, despite the extreme chaos and the broken compass, their daily score added a steady 3.4 points. That brings their total season points to 34.6 points.
So we see the mechanics of slow, methodical progress there. The search for equilibrium, even in a fractured market, results in a compounding effect. They take fewer risks, they suffer fewer catastrophic drawdowns, but their daily gains are modest. It was a very low volatility path.
Then you look at the Wave Riders, and the risk profile is completely different.
Night and day.
Their carryover balance coming into today was a brutal negative 29.1 points. They were deep underwater, likely suffering from a series of those whipsaw events we just talked about.
Almost certainly.
But then, their daily score today was an absolute monster, a massive surge of 32.4 points in a single day.
Incredible.
That explosive move brought their total season points back from the dead, landing them slightly in the green at 4.8 points.
The Wave Riders perfectly illustrate the double-edged sword of surging force tracking. Momentum cuts both ways, with extreme prejudice.
Right. When the momentum breaks against you, as it clearly did to give them that negative 29.1 carryover, the drawdowns are terrifying. The pressure on the portfolio must be immense.
It is a high volatility whiplash. However, their philosophy allows for asymmetric upside.
Right.
The mechanics of their algorithm dictate that when they finally do catch that correct wave, when the market finally trends hard in one direction without reversing, the algorithm aggressively scales into it.
I see.
It buys more and more as the trend confirms itself, resulting in that explosive 32.4-point recovery in just a single session.
So it's basically the difference between taking the stairs up the side of a building point by point and strapping yourself to a roller coaster that, occasionally derails.
Exactly.
Both teams eventually made it into the green, but the journey was vastly different.
Very different.
But, when I synthesize all of this, the broken compass, the massive losses, the single scouts into the dark, what really stands out to me is the research stance of Team AI Lab itself.
Yes, the lens through which we view this experiment is just as important as the data itself.
Right. Looking at an algorithm finishing its lifespan with a negative 11.7 point loss, or looking at a team carrying a negative 29-point deficit, our human instinct is to say, well, that failed, the algorithm is broken, turn it off.
Naturally, yeah.
But that is not how Team AI Lab operates. Today's brutal market conditions, the negative index contrast, the falling units, none of this is framed as a defeat in these observation logs.
No, because in the realm of advanced machine learning and algorithmic development, defeat is an irrelevant emotional concept.
Right.
This is an entirely cold, forward-looking process. Every single loss, every time a momentum algorithm buys the top of a false wave and crashes.
Or every time a new equilibrium scout steps out into the market and gets instantly dissolved.
Exactly. It is highly valuable objective observation data.
It's essentially paying the tuition required to learn the new rules of the game.
That's a perfect way to phrase it. You cannot build an algorithm capable of surviving an unprecedented anomaly without first feeding it the exact data of how things break inside that anomaly.
So that negative 11.7 point exit from the electric appliances unit
Isn't a failure. It is a meticulously documented blueprint of exactly what not to do the next time the market dynamics mimic May 22, 2026.
Wow.
This data is the raw material required to secure the next victory. Team AI Lab doesn't want an easy market. They want the storm. Because the storm is where the absolute most valuable data lives.
to watch two distinct philosophies. The stubborn search for the stable center and the wild ride of the surge just get stress tested against a reality that actively wants to destroy both of them is incredible.
It really is.
And discovering those few lighthouses in the dark that somehow found a way to adapt, it's a profound observation of resilience.
It forces us to appreciate the sheer complexity of building logic that can unlearn its own foundational rules when the environment demands it.
Yeah. And that actually leaves me with a thought that I want you, the listener, to mull over as we wrap up today's deep dive.
Let's hear it.
We've spent all this time talking about artificial intelligence, observation logs, and market physics. But think about the human parallel here.
Oh, it's interesting.
If highly advanced, emotionless algorithms operating on strict 10-session lifespans are struggling this hard to unlearn the old rules and adapt to an unprecedented storm, what does that mean for us?
It is the ultimate question of adaptability.
Exactly. When the rules of our own industries, our own careers, or our own lives suddenly change overnight, how much of our own active roster of habits is secretly dragging us down like that negative 11.7 point unit?
Yeah.
Are we clinging to an old compass that is pointing in the wrong direction? And perhaps most importantly, when your world turns upside down, how many sessions does it take you to realize you need to draft a completely new strategy? Something to think about.